Hello everyone, greetings from sunny wintry Sydney. My name is Anna Kharzieva. I'm a food writer, social historian from Moscow, Russia. I'm in Sydney now because I left Russia after the war on Ukraine started on the 24th of February, and I left on the 4th of March following my protest and outspoken position about the war. So I am now living in Australia, and I'll be teaching you today how to make an Eastern European dish called vareniki or pierogi in Polish, and you may know them as pierogi. We call them vareniki in Russian, and in Ukrainian I believe it's also vareniki. It's a very simple dish, a very hearty one. It's one of my favorites, and I'm going to show you 3 different fillings. One with potatoes and onion, one with cottage cheese, tvarog, egg and sugar, and one with berries. And you can make your own fillings as well, whatever you feel like. The meat ones are called pelmeni, so they're a slightly different version of practically the same thing, but we use different words for them. So today we're going to make the non-meat ones. So we're going to start by making the dough because it needs a little bit of time to rest and for the gluten to do its work, to make it nice and stretchy and elastic. And it's quite amazing how much it changes over just 20 minutes. So definitely allow a little bit of time for it to sit and rest. And if you're cooking along right now, we will start with the dough, and while we prepare our fillings, that will be enough time for the dough to rest. So I've got here 1 large egg that I'm going to lightly beat with a fork. I am in a new to me kitchen. We just moved into a rental place after 4 months of bouncing around from place to place. So I don't have my full equipment that I would normally have, but this is just the times that we're living in right now, unfortunately. So then I'm adding some water, 150 mils. Again, I don't even have any measuring cups or anything like that, but I think this should be about right. And the beauty of these recipes, these home recipes, is that nothing is really set in stone. You can play around, you can add a little bit more, a little bit less, but obviously we want a certain consistency at the end. Sorry, so forgive the quality, filming quality. And then we need 300 grams of flour, but again, like my grandmother used to say, the amount of flour that the dough will take. So basically you're mixing it in until you see that you've got the right consistency, and it can be a little bit less or a little bit more than the recipe states, because it depends on the size of your eggs, on exactly how much water you added, on the flour itself. So I'm going to start mixing it in, and then I'll show you the kneading, which is pretty simple. None of this is very difficult at all. It's one of those dishes that is beautiful in its simplicity, and it's just a perfect family meal, and one that many families, of course, have now been deprived of. All the Ukrainians who've been displaced, who've had to leave their homes and stay with different people in different places. So if you're hosting a Ukrainian family, I'm sure that they would really appreciate this dish if you make it for them. So you can see here that I probably have just enough dough, and I'm going to transfer it onto a floured surface, and I'll continue kneading by hand. So I've mixed the dough in the bowl, and what I'm going to do now is just flour the surface that I'm using, and I will continue kneading by hand. And once it's quite smooth, it will go into a plastic bag and it will just rest nicely for 20 minutes, half an hour. Even if you only have 10 minutes, that should do it as well. Just as long as it gets some time to rest. Like we all do, we all need to rest occasionally, so this is what our dough will be doing. And so it's sort of like this right now, but some nice kneading and it will be pretty smooth. I will show you from a different angle. Okay, so now we're going to start making the fillings, which is exciting. I'll start with the potato and onion one. It's actually probably my favorite, and also the onion takes a little bit of time to prepare. So I've got 3 boiled potatoes here, but they're quite big, so maybe 4 if you're using smaller ones. I'm going to add some lovely butter. I don't know if you are of the more butter the better school. I am. So I'm going to add what will be about 1.5 tablespoons of butter. And I'm just going to let it melt on the potatoes. I actually boiled these potatoes last night and I've just reheated them now. So cheated a little bit. But if you want to, if you've just boiled them, then it's perfect, and you just add the butter into the pot and let it melt nicely. I'm going to add a little bit more, and we're going to add some salt because it's a filling, because the potatoes will sit inside the dough pouch, the vareniki. We want to add plenty of salt. So the way that I salt any fillings for pies or for pierogis, pelmeni, I over salt the filling, because otherwise you can't really taste the salt enough in the filling. And obviously, especially with pies, you can't really add more inside. So I'm going to add some salt, and then I'm going to do a taste test a bit later, and we'll see whether that's enough. Obviously, you can add as much as you want, as much or as little as you want. It's purely a preference thing. And now the main flavor in the vareniki pierogi, or in the potato, sorry, pierogi, comes from the onion, in my opinion. I mean, the potato is this beautiful sort of velvety pouch, and then the caramelized onion gives so much flavor. So we're going to caramelize. I've got 1.5 onions here. You can have 2. Honestly, you can have more, because we're going to add some into the filling, and we're also going to serve the vareniki with caramelized onions on top. So we're going to leave some aside for that, and it's just so delicious, and I love the presentation of this dish. where you've got the onions on the inside and on the outside, and you've got butter on the inside and the outside, and then just sprinkle it with some herbs, and you're good to go. So onions, if you want to add herbs or garlic, you can, of course. In fact, you can play around however you want. I like this dish, and it's sort of traditional beauty. I don't add any extra herbs or anything like that, because I like that simplicity. I think it's really beautiful. And once we've all chopped the onions, we're going to let them sweat in the frying pan. And now, as usual with caramelizing onions, if you do have more time, then you put them on lower heat, and it's really nice that way, because it can take an hour, but the result will be amazing. If you don't have the time, you can put the heat up, you can add a bit of sugar, and again, it will be really good as well. It's just that slow caramelized onions are quite special. But since we're doing a class, and if you guys are all together and you can't wait to eat, I would certainly go for the fast version, which is just slightly high heat and a little bit of sugar to help the caramelization. And to show you the onions as well, I'm just slicing them. That's just not, I'm not going for anything too fine, but of course you can if you prefer that. But bear in mind that cooked, they will be smaller as well. Pieces will be smaller, so it won't be a big deal. In fact, it will be nice. All right, now for some actual frying. I've got some butter here, and I'm going to add some oil as well so that the butter doesn't burn. And I'm going to throw the onions in, let them sweat, and once they've released their natural liquids, I might add a little bit of vinegar or a little bit of water and a little bit of sugar, and just let them become nice and brown and delicious. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt as well. So here we go. I don't have a spatula yet, so I'm going to use a spoon. So this is a couple of minutes in. You can see the onions are already browning. And I'm going to add a little bit of sugar and let them cook some more until they're completely soft and a nice brown color. While the onions are cooking, I'll just tell you that if you have any questions about vareniki or any other Eastern European food, mainly Russian food that I specialize in, please feel free to ask. Reach out on Instagram, Anna.Kharzeva, or find my website, Anna Kharzeva, as well, or you can email me. And if you have questions about other things, cultural things, historical things as well, also feel free to ask, because this is a very difficult and confusing time with what's happening in the world, and it's hard to understand how Russia can be doing what it's doing, and in fact it's hard for me to understand as well, but at least as someone who is Russian and has seen the recent years in Russia, I can perhaps help you a little bit in trying to comprehend. So look at our onions here, lovely and brown and good to go. So I'm going to add some of these into our potato filling. and I'm going to leave some of these to serve. So now we're just going to mash the potatoes. If you do have a proper potato masher, obviously that would be much better. I don't have one yet because, like I said, this is a new kitchen, and in fact I moved here and promptly got COVID, so I haven't been out to buy anything, and hence the sort of nasally voice. I apologize for it. Still COVID just lingering slightly. So once you've got your mash, and you know what the beauty of it, if you have leftover mash that for some reason, you know, didn't get eaten at dinner and you're wondering what to do with it, this is one way of using it up and making sure it doesn't go to waste. Or another way is to make a bake, or zapiekanka, as my great grandmother used to say. Well, actually it's just the name for it, but she used to make it all the time, which is anything, any leftovers you have, with some egg on top, some breadcrumbs, and baked, basically. That's it. Very simple, non-glamorous. I had a lot of zapiekanki when I was a kid, and well, they were always good, and with some sour cream on the side and some dill on top, you know, they're just perfect. Okay, so we're going to add our lovely brown onions into the potato filling, mix it through, and taste for salt, and that's it. The potato filling is good to go. We're going to move on to the cottage cheese one, tvorog, which is usually sweet, but you can make it savory as well if you add salt instead of sugar, and you can also add some dill or any other herb you like, but dill is quintessential to Eastern European cooking. I have lots of friends, expat friends, who've lived in Moscow from different countries, and most of them went home hating dill because it was in everything, including pizza and sushi. I wouldn't recommend adding it to pizza or sushi, obviously, but it is great with most Eastern European dishes. Just a lovely herb. And obviously sour cream, smetana, is something that we love. So I'm just going to taste a little bit here. Need more salt, because, no, like I said, the last thing you want is undersalted filling, because then you're just adding salt at the top, over the top, but it doesn't quite work. Still not enough. And I'm going to add some more butter also, because we don't want the filling that's too dry either. And we're just going to set it aside and get on to the tvorog. That's good. Now for the cottage cheese tvorog filling, it's very simple. We've got an egg yolk. I've got tvorog or cottage cheese. This one is quite runny. You can get different ones. Texture can be very, very different. Can be quite dry, can be grainy, can be smooth. So depending on what's available to you, you can add a full egg, so not just the egg white, the egg yolk. You might want to add some sour cream if it's very dry. If it's too runny, you can add a little bit of flour. So I'm just going to mix this. Very simple. I'm going to add some sugar. So I'm making the sweet version. If you're making savory, then obviously you can add herbs and salt. And so now once that's mixed in, I'm going to add a little bit of flour because this texture is a little bit too runny. And I haven't used cottage cheese in Australia yet. I'm familiar with the ones we've got in Russia, but not so much here. And hopefully you have a bit of a variety where you are. You might look at in Polish shops and in Russian shops, Eastern European shops, basically of any kind. So now this is looking good. And if you want to mix some berries into it, obviously you can as well. I might leave that just plain. And lastly, the berries. I've got some thawed out blueberries and I've got blackberries here also. The most traditional filling is cherry. I've asked my friend who grew up in Ukraine, she said cherries were the most common ones. I'm just using the berries that I have, but honestly any berries will be great. And cherries are that beautiful tart flavor that pairs really well with the sweetness of the sour cream and the sugar. So all I'm doing is mixing the berries with some sugar, and that's it. And now we're going to get to the dough, and we'll actually assemble the vareniki and fry them up and serve them, and that's it. I haven't shown you the sugar part of it. So I'm using brown sugar, which is not traditional for Eastern Europe. Normally we just use white sugar, refined sugar. But this is what I have, and I like to think it's a bit healthier for my kid. So just coating it in the sugar, and that's all. So I got the dough out of the plastic bag. It was still a little bit sticky, but I just rolled it in a bit of flour, and you can see that it's nice and smooth now. And now it's just the last step, well, almost the last step. We're going to roll it out and cut out circles and stuff them with the filling. So I've separated the dough into two pieces, so it's easier to roll out a smaller piece. And since I don't have a rolling pin, I'm going to use a wine bottle. Tried but trusted trick. Luckily I had an empty one. And just roll it out quite smooth, quite thinly, basically as thin as you can go. And as soon as that's done, we're just going to cut out circles using a glass or a mug. So I've rolled out the dough. See, it's quite thin here. I'm using this mug to cut out circles. So just press it in, same as for cookies, and here we go. And now all we need to do is fill these and close them up. So now that we've got the circles cut out, we can still stretch them out a little bit by hand. Just put them on your hand here, on the palm of your hand. Put some filling inside. Let's start with potato. Obviously not too much, because then you won't be able to close it. And then you close it over the top and pinch it in on the sides. Make sure the filling isn't sticking out. Now you can leave it like that as well, but we normally close to a braid around, like this. So I'll show you up close. So I'm closing it here, just finding one spot where I can pinch it comfortably, pinching it all around. Again, it's totally fine to leave it as is. In fact, that's actually completely done. And if you do want to close it, sort of do the braid, just close one circle like this, sort of a triangle, like this, sort of giving it a lovely braid. Like this. Yep. So we're going to do the same trick with the rest of the fillings. And if you're doing this in the cooking class setting, you may not have the time to really make all of them. If you're at home, you can, it will take some time to finish up all of these fillings. If you don't have time now, you can easily leave the dough in the fridge for a day. You can freeze it as well. So don't worry if you don't get it all done today. And in fact, the vareniki themselves freeze nicely. You just need to freeze them on one layer at a time, because otherwise they all stick together. So what I do is I put them on a well-floured surface, like a cutting board, one right next to each other. Wait maybe half an hour till they're frozen a little bit, and then I get them out and I put the next batch in. And once they're all frozen, I just throw them in a bag and freeze them like that, and it works well. Just doing the berries now. I've done the cottage cheese. I had to add a little bit more flour into the mixture because it was a bit too runny. And you know what? I'm going to leave the berry ones like this so I can tell once I boil them together with the cottage cheese which is which. An old trick my grandmother used to do. Now we're going to boil our vareniki in salted water, the potato ones. And it doesn't take very long, maybe 7-10 minutes. Because as you know, the filling is already cooked. We're just boiling the dough. So the boiled vareniki are out. I'm going to add some butter. Let it melt. Some lovely herbs. If you have dill, that would be perfect. I've got some parsley here. And I'll add our onions and pepper as well. So here we go. Here our vareniki topped with caramelized onion, butter, sour cream, cracked pepper, and herbs. Now with the berry and cottage cheese vareniki, I boiled them together in a different batch because I used unsalted water, and I'm going to serve them with some sour cream, which I'll be able to do better with 2 hands, and some berry syrup because I used thawed out berries with sugar. So this is the juice from the bottom, and I'll show you the end result in a sec. So here we go, some sour cream, some brown sugar, mint, and some syrup. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope your vareniki turned out delicious. And if you're interested in stories from the Soviet period and stories from my grandmother, you'll find them in my book, The Soviet Diet Cookbook, Exploring Life, Culture, and History, one recipe at a time. It's available on Amazon, or you can contact me directly to get a copy. Bye.